so oftentimes when somebody says like their horse blew, right? It's never that moment. I always go, it's that trigger stacking or loading. It's all those little things that happened before that experience that just piled up, which is why I advocate for people to use curiosity. So, because it's easier on your nervous system, because that judgment can trigger things. If we stay in that state of trigger and they begin to stack, it will create this kind of like a whew, right. And for a horse, it's either the horse bucks or they check out and they run the other direction of where they should be going. But it was like all of like, for example, one horse, there was a lot of bright lights because they were taking his pictures in the morning. The humidity was different in the air. He was in a different state, which, people would be like, well, what is that? Well, right. But if you're used to cold weather and then you come here to Texas humidity, like all of those different changes for a horse's sensitive nervous system, right? They had they hauled too late at night so you add all those things up. So the horse didn't just decide to lose it. It was the trigger stacking that happened. And so the hope would be that they would, hopefully I get the point across as to watch those small things. And if you see that, help your horse regulate through really good, nourishing movement before you just send them out into the arena. They need to be connected with, they need to have a chance to release the stress of their own body and nervous systems before you ride. But the trigger stacking is a real thing, and that happens for us as human beings. It's all those little things that start stacking up.
How do you see the concept of glimmers and micro moments of connection, micro moments of movement? Like you said, Leah, you talked about those micro movements. How do you see that helping with the trigger stacking?
I do really believe, like in the classroom, if you can truly take a break in a way that it gets a real authentic reset for someone. Like I know for myself, I was rushing around the other day and I have like 4 roses that are very old and sometimes scrappy, and they're just in the front of my house. And one of the ones that has the most fragrant flower had a new bloom. And I was just like, oh, wow. And I just stopped in my tracks. I was just so surprised to see it. It was such a truly wonderful surprise. And and it just really stopped me. And I smelled it because it's the most fragrant rose I have. Do you know what I mean? It was like that thing. I valued it. It mattered to me. I've been trying to feed it and get it to bloom. Like it was a real value pause for me that really gave me a moment. And like I thought to myself, wow, that was 2 seconds and what a reset. It really did. Like I wasn't rushing. I wasn't in my busy brain anymore. And it made me think like, what do we really authentically have in our classrooms? It's really tough. And in so many of my classrooms, it's screen time. And that's it, like, that's just what kids are working for. That's where they find that value, but I just don't really believe it resets their nervous system. It's more like a numbing kind of, So I feel like it's a little bit of a challenge that we have right now more than other times, in like where you'd be like, oh, go outside and kick a ball around with a friend, or something where maybe you would be laughing or you would have social engagement. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's almost like it's always sort of a lower value.
Interesting point. That's why it works. So people hand their kids their phones and iPads and stuff because it does. But how do we see that? And when we're talking, School Moves is all about movement and getting in our bodies. But if that works you have a child who's volatile and you hand them an iPad with a game on it. That's interesting.
I feel like it's an effective, I don't know, like behavioral distraction.
It's not retuning the nervous system.
Yeah.
So what's happening is, okay, so as we were talking, I was thinking about that. So we just keep handing them this iPad or this technology because they keep blowing. So we keep doing this. And after a while, it's like a cat. You scratch on the chair and you get to go out. So the cat learns to scratch on the chair so they get to go out. So every time that student blows, they get the technology. And so we need to look at what's creating the blow, that volatile piece, and is it something neurodevelopmental, and is it some movement that child is needing, like deep pressure and heavy work, and where we build that proprioceptive input so they have better sense of where am I in space, where am I in this room, how do I connect with my body so that everything coming at me isn't a trigger. So does that make sense? Like, how do we, like, to me, that's that foundation of getting in our body. And unless our body's regulated, I don't know, it's just going to be a constant. So what happens when they don't have an iPad and they blow? How do we teach them how to regulate using their body, using deep pressure, heavy work?
Well, and I love this idea of trigger stacking, because what I think happens is when you move, then maybe, like in my mind, when you were talking about the trigger stacking, you know, those like stacking rings.
Yes.
Yep. It kind of was
Those cups.
visualizing that, yeah. And that, so when you have a true, like a true sensory break, a true nervous system reset, you've taken some of those rings off.
Yes.
So when
Yes.
you, and a lot of times, like my teachers will say, like it will be an incentive rather than a behavioral management tool with the iPad, like get this task done
Mm.
and you earn this time. I truly believe that time is like I get to be off, but it doesn't take any of those rings off of their stacking pyramid.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Whereas, like, if you did something that was more nourishing to your nervous system, then maybe you really do take some pressure off that, that
Absolutely.
pyramid. So that's
Absolutely.
where I'm seeing it kind of missing.
And and if we can see it in that way, I think it, whatever setting we're all in, we're on this call and those who are listening by recording, if we can understand how powerful that concept is, it adds a sense of deeper intention of how we're living and moving through this.
Yeah.
And I think that takes our level of connection in a deeper way with our students or with our classrooms as they become one big nervous system.
Yeah.
Yeah, handing them the iPad isn't helping them to check in and say what went on there and where is my nervous system. It's not teaching them a lifelong skill. A lifelong skill is, as an adult, they may be a parent someday and have little ones. We're not teaching them how to monitor those states and then how to gather those regulating resources. That could be one of the resources in their backpack, but it shouldn't be the resource in their
Yes.
backpack.